Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and it's great to be on with you. Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy. It's a brand new book out of Sophia Institute Press, and we're going to have a conversation about this. How heaven prepared many millennia before, not many, but, before it all happened, before Our Lady showed up in 1531, she prepared for those people to have an opportunity at a conversion, and they converted big time, 9 to 10 million within a decade. It's a huge deal. And the big question is, why? She loved those people so much that she went through so much effort to bring them home. Why? For what purpose? What's the end game there? I want to ask those questions. And that's coming up today with Joseph and Monique Gonzalez at 30 past the hour. Brent Haynes is supposed to be on, our good friend, the freedom fighter, Catholic attorney. Is going to be on to weigh in on the FBI's breach of religious freedom report that came out this week. That continues to be in the headline news. McCarthy is retiring now that he's no longer Speaker of the House. But did you know, 82 years ago today, Pearl Harbor was attacked, and did you know that the fighter pilot for the Japanese forces who led the attack was Mitsuo Fuchida? He and the 146 pilots who worked for him attacked and killed some 2,400 Americans 82 years ago today. But did you know that the response to that was the Doolittle raid? And on the Doolittle raid, Jacob DeShaver was one of the pilots on that, or one of the airmen in the Doolittle raid, and he was taken captive. He was held for 40 months, and through his witness, he converted Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the raid on the Pearl Harbor attack, December the 7th, 1941. He converted Mitsuo Fuchida, who would go on to spend the rest of his life as a Christian and evangelizing. Kind of an interesting story. Maybe we can get into more of that in the details, but I'll put a link to it in the show notes for you at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Remember to pray for the repose of the souls that were lost on that day 82 years ago. But let's pray. Let's begin. We have a lot to get to today. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day.
Saint Ambrose, pray for us. Ambrose was born around the year 340. The son of a Roman prefect in what is now modern Germany. On one occasion, when he was still just an infant, a swarm of bees surrounded him, touching his lips, before disappearing up towards heaven, foretelling the saint's great eloquence and resulting in his patronage of bees and beekeepers. While serving as a Roman official, the unbaptized catechumen Ambrose calmed a dispute over the succession of the See of Milan. His speech in the cathedral charmed the entire crowd, and at a moment of silence, a child called out, "Ambrose, Bishop!" Instantly the whole congregation took up the cry. Though Ambrose protested, the emperor approved of the people's choice, and over the course of 1 week, Ambrose received the sacraments and each stage of holy orders, culminating in his consecration as Bishop of Milan on December 7th, which is now maintained as his feast day. As bishop, Ambrose defended the faith against Arianism, and on multiple occasions he openly chastised emperors and other officials for their crimes, often barring them from communion until they did public penance. He wrote prodigiously on the faith, composed and encouraged the use of liturgical hymns like the Te Deum, and his countless converts included St. Augustine, whom Ambrose loved like his own son. The honey-tongued doctor, as he was known because of his eloquence, died on April 4th, 397. He was officially proclaimed a doctor of the Church by Pope Boniface VIII in 1298. Along with bees, beekeepers, and candlemakers, Ambrose is also one of the great patrons of bishops. St. Ambrose, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Catholic Vote reports federal court sides with man who made Hillary Clinton meme. A federal judge ruled in favor of a man who made satirical memes poking fun at then-candidate Hillary Clinton during the 2016 presidential election. The ruling temporarily stayed conservative social media user Douglas Mackey's 7-month prison sentence from election interference pending appeal. Mackey commented publicly on the order on Monday, saying, quote, "This ruling is huge because it means that the appeals court decided that my appeal presents substantial and debatable issues of law that, if resolved in my favor, will result in the conviction being vacated." The Hill reports Comer and Jordan threatened to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of court, or contempt of Congress, rather. House Republicans are threatening to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress if he does not appear for a scheduled closed-door deposition next week as a part of a subpoena. The legal counsel for the president's son, Abel Lowell, has said that Biden is willing to sit for a public hearing, but not for a private questioning. The letter represents an escalation of the battle between the House GOP and Biden as Comer and Jordan speed to the final stages of the multi-pronged impeachment inquiry probe into President Biden, which they aim to formalize with a vote next week. And Fox is reporting there was an active shooter at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas with multiple victims. Police at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas responded Wednesday to an active shooter at the Frank and Estella Beam Hall, the college's business school. Police said the suspect is dead, adding 3 victims died and another is in stable condition. 2 detectives who initially responded engaged the alleged shooter and fired their weapons, and the suspect was killed. Some reports suggest the shooter was a 67-year-old professor whose application to teach at the university was denied. However, that has yet to be confirmed. And those are your headline news. Let us pray for the repose of the souls lost in that tragic accident. The gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 and 24 through 27. Jesus said to his disciples, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. Everyone who listens to these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house upon a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house, but it did not collapse, and it had been set solidly on the rock. And everyone who listens to these words of mine but does not act on them will be like a fool who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house, and it collapsed and was completely ruined." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Boy, Pseudo-Christendom had some really excellent commentary today. Now, if you don't know what Pseudo-Christendom is, it's writings that were attributed to St. Chrysostom, or Chrysostom, however his name is properly said, but they can't prove that he said that, or it's likely he didn't write those. So they put them in this category called Pseudo-Christendom. It's from generally around the same time, maybe a little after, etc. Anyway, Pseudo-Christendom said this: Christ is the wise man who built his house, that is, the church, upon a rock, that is, upon the strength of the faith. The foolish man is the devil, who has built his house, that is, all the ungodly, upon the sand, that is, in the insecurity of unbelief, or upon the carnal, who are called the sand on account of their barrenness, both because they do not cleave together, but are scattered through the diversity of their opinions, and because they are immeasurable. The rain is the doctrine that waters a man. The clouds are those from which the rain falls. Some are raised by the Holy Ghost, as the apostles and prophets, and some by the spirit of the devil, as are the heretics. The good winds are the spirits of the different virtues, or the angels who work invisibly in the senses of men, and lead them to do good. The bad winds are the unclean spirits, The good floods are the evangelists and teachers of the people. The evil floods are men full of unclean spirit and overflowing with many words. Such are philosophers and other professors of worldly wisdom, out of whose belly come rivers of dead water. The church, then, which Christ has founded, neither rain of false doctrine shall sap, nor the blast of the devil overturn, nor the rush of mighty floods remove. Nor does it contradict this, that certain of the church do fall. For not all that are called Christians are Christ's, but the Lord knows them that are his. Whew, did you catch that? Not all that call themselves Christians are Christ's. Some will fall, some have fallen. It goes on to say, but against that house the devil has built comes down the rain of true doctrine, the winds, that is, the graces of the Spirit, or the angels, the floods, that is, the four evangelists, and the rest of the wise, and so the house falls, that is, the Gentile world, that Christ may rise. And the ruin of that house was great, its errors broken up, its falsehoods laid open, its idols throughout the whole world broken down. He then is like unto Christ, who hears Christ's words and does them. For he builds on a rock, that is, upon Christ, who is all good, so that on whatsoever kind of good anyone shall build, he may seem to have built upon Christ. But as the church built by Christ cannot be thrown down, so any such Christian who has built himself up upon Christ, no adversity can overthrow. Woo! So he turns the tables there, doesn't he? It's not the attack on us by the world, the flesh, and the devil. It's our attack on the world, the flesh, and the devil. It's time to take the fight to the enemy because they cannot withstand. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and it's great to be on with you. Coming up at 30 past the hour, Joseph and Monique Gonzalez are going to be on the program to talk about their new book from Sophia Institute Press, Guadalupe and the Flower Mound Prophecy, how these people were prepared for conversion a millennia or two before Our Lady even appeared there in 1531. It is a fantastic resource. I would encourage you to pick it up, but we're going to have that conversation. Why 9 to 10 million within a decade? That never happened anywhere else on planet Earth, as far as I know. So there must be something big in store for these people for the end of time. And I want to ask that question at 30 past. Do join us if you can. There are lots of stories in the news, of course, that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well. And of course, this week we saw the report drop from the Congress. The FBI's breach of religious freedom, the weaponization of law enforcement against Catholic Americans. To talk about this, to weigh in on this, our good friend, Brent Haynes, Catholic freedom fighter and attorney, joins us. Good morning to you, Brent Haynes.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, everyone.
Praise be to God. Glad you're on the team today. I know you had a really long night, so we're going to hopefully pray that you get some rest after this. But this is still a big story. In fact, I saw an article. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. I saw an article over at Newsmax. FBI sees Catholics as potential terrorists. And this was an opinion piece from Bill Donahue. And one of the points he points out in this, I want to get you to weigh in on this, was this was positioned, this memo, this infamous memo out of the Richmond office was getting ready to go viral, so to speak, across the whole country. They were planning to roll this out across the country. They were going to expand this operation, Brent.
Well, we learned about this back in February when FBI whistleblower, former agent and whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, someone you might know, Joe.
I do.
He revealed the existence of this memorandum, an FBI memorandum that identified traditional Catholics as extremists to be considered domestic terror threats, and it discussed strategies for infiltrating Catholic parishes and essentially the FBI would be monitoring and infiltrating, Catholic activities in churches and parishes in the United States. Now, once that memo became public, the FBI said it would be withdrawn. They tried to minimize it, saying it was only the product of the Richmond field office. And as you said, there's good evidence it was meant to be rolled out nationally. They have various ways of publishing memoranda and providing information to agents all across the United States and the FBI. And they had published this internally. Now, we knew a lot of this before, but what has happened now is the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary, they have a subcommittee called the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, and they have issued an interim report. And the report is approximately 30 pages long. It is sourced. It has the footnotes and the citations so people can go and look at the sources and satisfy themselves as to how credible or objective or fair the report is. Look, Joe, I spent a little bit of time on Capitol Hill, when I was a student. It's easy for committees, majorities, and minority parties and committees to write reports and basically to write political screeds. You really have to judge, these documents by how well they're written, what the reasoning is, and what evidence they have to support them. So people can look at this and check the citations themselves. Some of this is, I hate to sound like just your typical commentator, but we're running out of adjectives, Joe. I mean, it really is astonishing. The FBI, when they were called to account for this, they conducted their own internal review. Well, they interviewed these two intelligence analysts in the FBI Richmond office who had, decades of experience. One of them had 10 or more years of experience. The other had 18 or more years of experience at a minimum. So these are not rookies. This can't be passed off as a rookie mistake. And even if it were, you would wonder how it got that far. But among the admissions, Joe, first of all, the memo was inspired by one criminal suspect in a case in Virginia. One, Joe. And how did they know that he was a, quote unquote, radical traditional Catholic? Because he identified that way in his social media.
Wow.
And that's what got started. So that's bad enough right there. It's not as if there were a series of violent acts across the United States by people who were identified or who claimed to be Catholics. No, that's not it. It was based on one person. But let's move on, because there's something that I think really is even more astonishing. The authors of the report admitted that they relied upon as sources for their information and their report the Atlantic magazine, Salon, the online magazine, and the Southern Poverty Law Center.
All super solid sources, Brent. I don't even know what are you trying to infer by that? I mean, God, they're like the gospel accounts. I mean, they're almost as close to truth itself as one could get, don't you think, Brent?
Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, for people who don't know, is not a law center that fights poverty. There's a whole network of those, essentially financed by taxpayers, by the way, through the Legal Services Corporation in Washington, D.C., where, full disclosure, I used to work during the Reagan administration. It's a quasi-private entity established by the federal government. That's not what the Southern Poverty Law Center is. The Southern Poverty Law Center is a far-left activist group that raises money. Now, this is the key. They started fighting the Ku Klux Klan, all well and good, but they went off the rails. They raise money by publishing what they call a hate map of hate organizations in the United States, and you can go online and look it up. And strangely enough, they always try to get those numbers up. And if an organization has several chapters across the United States, they'll count each chapter as a different group because it doesn't look good for them if hate's actually going down in the United States. So who are these organizations on this hate group, on this hate list, Joe? How about Moms for Liberty?
They sound very dangerous, Brent. I mean,
they believe
Moms
in
for Liberty?
marriage. The Southern Poverty Law Center cited a statement by Tiffany Justice, one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty, where she essentially said that she believed that parents ought to raise their children and be involved in those intimate decisions, regarding sexuality, and that the government isn't a co-parent. And they cited that as a basis for calling them a hate group. Some of our listeners might be familiar with Eagle Forum. Older listeners and viewers will remember Phyllis Schlafly. So Eagle Forum is a hate group. The American Family Association, a Protestant evangelical organization that supports, shockingly, traditional family values. Gun Owners of America, a group that pushes for Second Amendment rights. Here's one for you, Joe, Church Militant. Now, look, we can criticize Church Militant for a lot of things, leaving aside the recent, information about them, which was more of a personal nature. Church militant is too strident sometimes. You can have a message that's true and perhaps say it in an uncharitable way. That doesn't make you a hate group. Have you heard of the Ruth Institute, Joe?
I have.
And the co-founder received from our Sunday Visitor an award about 10 years ago. Why is the Ruth Institute on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate list? Why? Because they advocate for traditional marriage. Anybody that is a Christian, or even if you're not a Christian, anybody that advocates for the idea of marriage as it existed for thousands and thousands of years as being an institution between a man and a woman is automatically labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So when you go online and look at the groups they have listed, and Wikipedia has a nice list broken down by category, you will see one Christian organization after another. Now, you might remember this, Joe. The Family Research Council is also on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list. Now, that's notable because several years ago, a man took a firearm, went into the lobby of the Southern Poverty Law Center with food from Chick-fil-A because he was going to shoot it up and kill people. And fortunately, he was stopped by the security guard. And when he was interviewed by the police, what was his motive? What did he admit in his interrogation with the police? He found them listed on the website of the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group. That's what this group does. That's what this group does, and that's who the FBI was relying upon for this memo. They also relied upon Salon, as we said, and the Atlantic magazine. I read the Atlantic magazine sometimes, but it is a far liberal magazine. Here's some headlines from the current issue or the current website for Atlantic magazine, Joe. The truth won't matter if re-elected Donald Trump will once again churn out absurdity and outrage with factory efficiency. The Proud Boys love a winner. A second Trump term would validate the violent ideologies of far-right extremists and allow them to escape legal jeopardy. A plan to outlaw abortion everywhere. Activists hope a Trump Justice Department would criminalize the procedure with or without a federal ban. Donald Trump versus American history, and I could go on. Does that sound like a fair, objective source for information to write a memo about interfering with the constitutional rights of people who are going to church in this country?
Fair and balanced is what it sounds like there, Brent. I mean, I don't understand what you're complaining about. These seem like rock-solid sources for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to be referencing in their pursuit of traditional Catholics, which they hope to roll out across the country. Then they deny in committee hearings that they, it's not that bad. It's no big deal. It's a couple of people. And to top it all off, nobody's getting fired over any of this. There's zero retribution on any of it. No justice whatsoever.
You're stealing my thunder there, Joe. That was a point I was going to close with. But while we're talking about the sources and the quality of this, let's talk about the review process. There essentially was no review process. There was no peer review process. They had a few people in the office look at it. To describe it briefly, the memo explains it in detail. They cite people. The House subcommittee interviewed the special agent in charge of the Richmond field office. He admitted that he had not read the entire memo. He had only skimmed parts of it, and he only skimmed parts of it to show that he was engaged with the intelligence division. He was part of keeping his people motivated and encouraged. No, he didn't look at it and go, hey, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure there's something in the First Amendment about religious freedom. Maybe we ought to be careful. Let's see what our lawyer thinks. And while we're on that topic, Joe, their top lawyer in the FBI field office in Richmond, called the Chief Division Counsel, he read the memo, and what did he do, Joe? What did he do? Did he say, we need to proceed cautiously? We're talking about investigating people based, on their religion or related to their religion. There's a constitutional right. We should be careful. Did he express any concern about infringing on the constitutional right to the free exercise of religion? No. Did he warn the FBI agents, if you're going to do this, you need to be very careful about how you proceed? People have a constitutional right to religious freedom? No, none of that. And that's the FBI's top lawyer. And then, as you said, this got published internally, is the phrase I used earlier. And as you said, they were rolling it out nationwide. They'd contacted the Portland office and the Los Angeles office. They looked around the country to try to find some other cases. In the Portland office, they found one case, and the suspect was already dead. So there was no uprising out there.
Let's not forget the story from last week, Brent. Let's not forget that story from last week about the FBI raiding the house because a 15-year-old boy posted pictures in a private chat group filled with FBI agents coaxing him to post pictures in this chat group. So, and then they raided him, took him to court, and it was a hot mess. All the charges have been since dropped, but nonetheless, the damage is done. That's what we're dealing with there. So, yeah, upside down world. Brent Haynes, get some rest. God bless you. We appreciate your insight into this story. God love you, Brent. Thanks again for being on with us today.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, more breaking news and stories, and then Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy. It's going to be a great conversation. Joseph and Monique Gonzalez are going to be on the team. All that and more is headed your way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. Here are your headline news. Ground News reports China launches world's first fourth-generation nuclear reactor. China has started commercial operations at the Shidouan nuclear reactor, a fourth-generation plant designed to improve efficiency, safety, and environmental impact. The high-temperature gas-cooled reactor uses a modular design and can produce heat, power, and hydrogen. China aims to increase its nuclear power capacity and reduce reliance on coal. LifeSite News is reporting CBC announces 600 worker layoff despite massive government subsidies. Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Canada's public radio and television broadcaster, announced that it must lay off 600 workers, approximately 10% of its staff, over budget concerns. The CBC's announcement comes just weeks after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government announced increased payouts for legacy media outlets ahead of the 2025 election. The subsidies are expected to cost taxpayers $129 million over the next 5 years. And the Pillar reports Archbishop orders future priest to take a liturgy oath. Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Archbishop Andrews Thashath of the Apostolic Administrator of the Archeparchy of Ernakulam-Anagamali. Archbishop Thashath has held the position since July of 2022 and made little headway in his quest to introduce the new uniform liturgy in the Archeparchy. And thus, he's required them to take an oath. Yikes, those are your headline news. Hey, good morning to everybody on iCatholic Radio today. Praise be to God. Soon, hopefully, very, very soon, we're going to roll out. I mean, we're really heating up now. I know I've been saying this now for months, but on the app, the iCatholic Radio app, you're going to get iCatholic Plus, iCatholic Radio Plus, which is premium content. We're going to launch it with the release of our brand new documentary film called The Secret of the Saints in the End Times. That's coming very, very soon, hopefully in the next week. So if you haven't done so already, join the iCatholic Radio team in your iOS or Android app store. It's free. Just search for iCatholic Radio. We'd love to have you on board. Hey, I got this book from Sophia Institute Press called Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy, How God Prepared the Americas for Conversion Before the Lady Appeared. And you guys know, if you've been hanging around me for any length of time, I absolutely love Our Lady of Guadalupe. I absolutely am enamored by the history, the actual history, the original sources versus the revisionist history that comes out in this modern world we live in. And my theory is, you guys have heard this before, my theory is, I believe Our Lady of Guadalupe plays a pivotal role in the end times. I believe there's something incredibly special that's about to go down on planet Earth because specifically of Our Lady of Guadalupe. To talk about this book and what their theory is in this book, which I find fascinating, is Joseph and Monique Gonzalez, the authors. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for your time today.
Good morning. Thank you for having us
Joe.
on.
Thanks for having us.
I really am enjoying your book. I haven't read it all yet. I've gone through major parts of it to prepare for our conversation. I plan to read the whole thing because it is fascinating. Your theory that you propose in this book, your detail, your research, it is really, really good. I just want to say, so essentially you're making the theory that well before 1531, heaven was preparing the way, paving the road for the day when 9 to 10 million people, the Nahuatl people, would come into the church within a decade, which, as far as I know, there's been lots of evangelization, but nowhere on planet Earth at any time have 9 to 10 million people come into the church in a decade. That's special in a unique way. But what I found interesting about your theory, and I want you to get your comment on this, was like I had this book by Cardinal Daniel, written, I think he wrote this in the 40s. He proposes a similar theory of preparing these pagan peoples, planting seeds, preparing for their evangelization. Warren Carroll, in his first volume of his work on Christendom, also seems to hint on this. St. Paul in Athens, quoting a pagan poet to them, basically is indicating the same idea, that heaven has great plans and the devil may use it for evil, but boy, does heaven use it for good. Isn't that the heart of your theory?
Absolutely. The concept was coined by Eusebius back in the 3rd century, called preparatio evangelica, which means evangelical preparation, which is accepted Catholic doctrine. This idea that a pagan culture could be prepared in advance before missionaries come in and evangelize people. A pagan culture has been around for a long time, and we cite several examples in China, Korea, where certain concepts were implanted and later on they were fulfilled. Once the gospel message reaches those cultures, it makes a connection, and we call it a bridge of understanding, where a pagan concept is able to cross over into a Christian concept, and it leads pagan cultures. So, we bring that up in chapter 2, and we say, well, if it's happened all over the world, why couldn't it happen in Mesoamerica? In order to set the reader up for the rest of the book where we go into our hypothesis.
There's so much that could be discussed here. We could spend, I would say, hours going through some of this stuff. It is so good. But let me just get you to give us like the elevator pitch on the flower world. What was these Nahuatl peoples, how did they see this universe? How did they see religion? How did they philosophically, theologically, what does this flower world represent?
Okay, well, the elevator pitch would be, everybody knows about the miraculous image on the tilma. Everybody knows about the millions of conversions, as you mentioned, and most people know about the story behind it, the narrative, which is when St. Juan Diego met the Virgin Mary. Most people know that. We call that the tip of the iceberg, okay? But below the surface of the water, we're saying that there's essentially 3,000 years of preparation that started. Of course, this event occurred in 1531 AD. We say that in 1500 BC, that in what's called the middle formative Olmec period, the Olmec civilization was really the cradle of the civilization for the Americas, that God was already planting concepts and ideas. So beneath the surface of what is known about Guadalupe and the Tilma and everything else are two major concepts, flower world and Nahuatl philosophy. Briefly, Monique will explain what flower world is.
So flower world, just to take people into this and how it's connected with Our Lady of Guadalupe, is that even from the very beginning of the Guadalupe narrative, Juan Diego himself identifies this place. And we find it in the very first couple of phrases that he uses. First, as he's traveling down southwards, he's 14 miles north of Mexico City, and he's traveling down to participate in the sacraments. As he's walking by the hill of Tepeyac, he finds himself swept into this paradisal realm where it's just everything's radiating with light. There's these intense colors that he's never seen before. Everything smells amazing, and everything's singing. The flowers are singing. The earth is singing. And upon hearing all of this and being in this place, he says, "Am I worthy of what I hear?" It's the very first thing he says, which is an unusual thing to say, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then the second thing he says is, could I be in the place my ancestors spoke of, the flower world paradise in Xochitlalpan and Tonacatlalpan in the land of heaven? So the moment he does this, he's tying himself to this ancient indigenous belief system in a floral solar paradisal realm that's outer dimensional. Sorry, I know.
I'm glad you tried it, not me. I found this utterly fascinating Can I just kind of cut to the chase just a little? I want to interject just to kind of, because I think this is so critical and fascinating to me. It blows my mind. So Juan Diego, according to your theory, he basically says these things that to him have great significance, to the Nahuatl people have great significance, but to us 21st century Americans mean almost nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much level more detail underneath. And what her response is to him, Our Lady's response to him, is equally depth. It has such depth to the Nahuatl people versus to us, it almost means it's very little. That is significant because if he's recognizing what's in front of him, the Garden of Eden is when I was going through, I'm like, this is the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
They understood that. Us knuckleheads, we're lost here, but Juan Diego recognized the Garden of Eden. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. See, so many of these things are glossed over in the story. We're saying that when Juan Diego says, could I be in the place our ancestors spoke of? What is he referring to? And he says it in his native Nahuatl language. He names it in Xochitlalpan, in Tonacatlalpan, which roughly translates into the flower world paradise. But as we explain in the book, that phrase is loaded with meaning. It means actually the source of all creativity, all beauty, all creation. It's essentially kind of like Plato's idea where the ideal forms are. But not only that, it makes a... Yeah,
I got to ask. So he says he's not, am I worthy to hear this? Am I worthy to see this? Am I worthy to be here? So in your book, you describe how it seemed like the vast majority of the Nahuatl people were not worthy to enter the flower world. Only the nobles, only the deserved people, and the God of near and far would make people worthy. But one of my questions is, if they weren't worthy to enter the flower world, where did they think they would end up when they died? Did they believe that most of them would end up in hell, for instance, or their version of hell, or some sort of purgatory? Or what was their belief in that if they didn't believe they were worthy to enter the flower world?
Yeah. So basically, there was a defined system called Mishlan, an underworld. So the majority of the people were believed to have gone to that location after they died. It was the previous belief system that you had to either die in battle or die in the midst of childbirth to be made worthy of this flower world paradise. And it comes from an ancestral narrative, actually.
Right. Most of the people, in fact, they even refer to Masahual, which means either a commoner, or it also means somebody who's not worthy to go to the flower world paradise, essentially. But it comes from an ancient belief system, which is reflected in their song poetry. And just quickly, the song poems talk about wanting to gather flowers in your tilma in order so that you can present them to the lords and princes. But only certain people could go to this flower world paradise, the place that Juan Diego refers to. So the thing is that it essentially what the song poem is, in summary, is that the singer wants to go to this flowery world. He wants to gather the flowers, but he's not able to. And the reason why is because he's not worthy, because he's sinful, he's afflicted, and he's not worthy. But as you just said, it goes on in this narrative, in these song poems, where only the God of far and near can make one worthy to enter the flower of paradise. And spoiler alert, when Guadalupe appears, she says, I am the mother. She identifies herself in 5 different ways, but one of the ways specifically she says, I am the mother of the God of far and near. The same one in the earlier song poems is the God identified, or the attribute of the God of far and near, which can make you worthy to enter the flower world paradise. So that's just one example of how the backstory fills in to the Nahuatl people. They would have known what this would have meant, and this is what we provide in the book.
I love this on so many levels. I've often said this about interpreting sacred scripture. When we look at the New Testament, we will often look at it from a 21st century Westerner's perspective, and we lose the detail. And, you know, I'm the most critical person on planet Earth about the song, Mary, Did You Know? And my answer is yes, absolutely. She knew, because She knew the prophecies like the back of her hand, and she knew when, like at the foot of the cross, when our Lord says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, she knows what that means. She knows the full passage of Psalm 22, not just the first verse, the first line. She knows the entire progress of Psalm 22 like the back of her hand. She had it memorized when we have to go look it up every time. So similarly to that, the things that were said, communicated to the apostles in that first century had deeper, greater meaning. Similar, Our Lady is communicating something deeper and greater. And for the first time, thanks to your book, I think I now have a better understanding of why exactly 9 to 10 million people rushed to become Catholics, to be baptized, to put off their pagan cult worship and to be put on the new Christ. I mean, it blows my mind just to contemplate what you guys have done in this book. And more is coming up after this break. That music means we have to go to a quick break. Joseph and Monique Gonzalez are here to talk about Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy by Sophia Institute Press. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes, but more is coming up right after this break. Don't go anywhere. Catholic Take. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. We're having a conversation with Joseph and Monique Gonzalez about their book, Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy, how God prepared the Americas for conversion before the Lady appeared. You got to get the book because there's no possibility you can get all the details in conversations like this. And there's so much in here that help you better understand some things. But we'll continue our conversation in the after show at the top of the hour. We say goodbye to the radio. We stay on the live video feed. You can go to the stationofthecross.com/ACT to catch the live video feed there. And you can also click the links underneath it to be able to go to those platforms and chat directly with us. And the Don's already asking me to ask questions about Pachamama, so I'll have to do that. I don't know if I'll get to it before the after show, but we'll get to it nonetheless. So join us if you can in the after show. All right, so one of the most fascinating things that, again, blew my mind about your book, the theories that you are putting together for this, and really it's a defense of the authenticity and the reality of Our Lady of Guadalupe against a modern world that rejects anything like the sort. Okay, so the world the Nawa people is, heaven is the flower world, but only a privileged few can ever go there. And these flower wars that they have, which led to hundreds of thousands of human sacrifices that we could get in. I'll get into more of that on December the 12th, I assure you. But nonetheless, it makes sense to me that when Juan Diego is saying these words that have such power and meaning, as you talked about in the last segment, that once that's widely known, that now the gates are open, the floodgates are open, and now everybody can have access to the flower world. No longer the rich and famous. They came in droves. They came in a hurry. Nowhere in the history of the planet has 9 to 10 million people converted so fast. Am I mistaken in that?
Absolutely. It's considered the greatest Christian conversion event in the history of the world.
Entire history.
And what we're trying to explain is that there were so many conceptual ideas, the flower world paradise, the fact that Juan Diego, as a masahual, as a commoner, found himself in this flowery paradise, and even himself says, am I worthy of what I hear? Even he was surprised that he entered this flowery paradise not as a rich and famous person, as you said, but there's so many other connections that we haven't even gotten into the symbolism of the flowers.
Right,
the flowers,
I skipped over all that.
I mean, there's a whole other thing to that. Flowers, to cut to the chase, were a connection between earthly beauty and heavenly beauty. But more than that, ultimate truth, ultimate divinity. So when the singer is trying to gather the flowers in his tilma, he's trying to gather or to make real ultimate truth and to possess it. But not only that, he wants to gather in his tilma and he wants to show it to people. So to cut to the chase there, Juan Diego, when he finds the flowers, he's actually gathering the truth of ultimate truth, ultimate divinity. And
this is how it'd be interpreted.
That would how it would have been interpreted. Of course, he would have also, as a baptized Christian, known that truth is Jesus Christ. So we say Jesus is the flower of truth.
And he's the one who made St. Juan Diego worthy of being able to obtain those flowers in his tilma, which is what did not happen in the previous ancient song poems. So it acts as a part one and a part two. The ancient song poems and then the Guadalupe narrative.
I skipped over all that part because I was worried about the time, and there's just so many amazing things about the story. Let's spend one more moment here on these ancient poems. So, and that's what led you on your journey, was your discovery of these ancient flower poems, these flower world poems that basically told the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe well before Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, it's undeniable that there's a connection between the flower song poems. Not only does it say specifically the flower world paradise, this exact same way that Juan Diego says it, but also the description, even down to the species of birds, are the same mentioned in the earlier flower song poems that Juan Diego is described in the Guadalupe narrative. So it's undeniable that there's a connection. Unfortunately for myself, when I discovered these back in the early 1990s, because I'm a composer and I wanted to set these Aztec song poems to music, all that I found on the secular side was that obviously the connection is some Spaniard used these earlier song poems
and made it up,
and to use it as source material for a fabricated Guadalupe story. That's the only line that they could come up with. Of course, when I met Monique, she had a different take on it, and we decided to get to the bottom of it.
Yes.
It couldn't have been fabricated. It seemed as if it was evangelical preparation, and that was the beginning of our hypothesis.
So we're going to run out of time quickly here on the radio side of things. We'll continue the conversation in the after show more casually, but let me just say this. So much is amazing about the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The information that we can glean from her, from the tilma, from her dress, from the the outer garment that she wore with the stars, the flowers on the dress, the location of those flowers on that dress. Just everything about just the tilma information alone has been mind-blowing. The fact that they've tried to destroy it and they never could. And then, of course, you bring another layer, a deeper, more profound layer to this, which again led to the 9 to 10 million people that is documented and confirmed that they came into the church within a decade, never to have happened anywhere else. What do you suppose? That's significant. What do you suppose is the plan of heaven to do this, especially given the light that Mexico today is a shadow of its former self, of this 6th century conversion experience? Do you think that there will be a reconquista of sorts, because Our Lady of Guadalupe has a heart of a mom for these people, and she desired their salvation so deeply that she would be sent by her son to do this? Something special must be in the works.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that, as we go throughout the course of the books, we're laying down those details, right? We're kind of showing how God goes into their culture and using all these different phrases that are very particular to who and what they are, how they express themselves. They are very unique, artistic, intuitive expressions, their understanding of the divine. So all these little things kind of add up over millennia, not decades, not centuries, that God is laying that out over millennia. So I guess where we're going with this is that, the cultural identity of Mexico, as we can see, it's very altered at the moment. There's a lot of, gangs coming up from that territory. And so basically what we're saying is we believe that if we can bring with what we're teaching Our Lady of Guadalupe, what happened back then, that can be hopefully applied right now to kind of reawaken their understanding of who and what they are, and how God did something very unique for them, and by extension can do it right now.
Exactly. What it comes down to is that God is in control of history, that if he did it for 3,000 years to prepare the people for those 4 days, December 9th through 12th in 1531, why is he not doing it for us today? That even though that we're in dark times right now, everything seems chaotic, everything seems
coming apart
at the seams, that all these little things might be put in place, as was for the people of Mesoamerica. Why couldn't it be happening for us today so that God can turn everything around? And as you said,
A eucatastrophe, perhaps.
Yeah, just Tolkien would say, why isn't that happening for us today?
Yeah, I mean, such an incredible, mind-blowing reality that Our Lady of Guadalupe has to offer us today. And you're going to get, if you can get this book, and I encourage you to do so, you can go to SophiaInstitute.com's website, SophiaInstitute.com, to get the book. We're going to put a link directly to the book in the show notes, but Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy, How God Prepared the Americas for Conversion Before the Lady Appeared. I mean, I'm sure you've looked into all the details about the tilma, the eyes being real, the heartbeat, the pulse, the temperature. Just everything about the tilma by itself is utterly amazing. This layer on top is just going to take it to that fourth dimension. I mean, it's just so good. It's a greater and better understanding. It's a deeper dive into the story and its significance. But I want to continue that conversation in the after show. But we got to say goodbye on the radio side. And today we're not going to be live tomorrow. It's a holy day of obligation. So we're going to be off. Producer Jake's got a best of show for you. We'll see you back here Monday morning. God bless you. God love you. And share us with a friend.
And we are back. Welcome to the after show, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Praise be to God. I think Joseph and Monique are on with us still. Just so you guys know, we get way more casual because it's not on radio anymore. So it's a little bit more loose. So no, you don't have to worry about anything.
We'll hang back.
Yeah, I'm gonna just welcome and greet some of our loyal insiders that are hanging out with us every single day. Praise be to God. Mike K said, this is fascinating. I know these poems from the Mexican progressive rock band, I believe. Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. Let's see here. Who is this? This is Yvonne. Yvonne's got her copy already. She posted a picture of her copy of the book.
All right. Go Yvonne.
Yeah, praise God. Paul, good morning to you. Kathleen, good morning to you. Cindy K, good morning to you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Yvonne and Eileen and Anna and Damon. Oh, it's snowing somewhere. Good thing it's not in Texas.
Oh, God.
Sharon. Damon, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Praise be to God. T Storm, good morning. Alberto from the UK. Kevin Phillips, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Sean and Judith and Merlin, praise be to God. Pete Santos, Ginger, Yvonne, Alberto, Frank, good morning to you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Let's see here. Who else? Aetna Murphy is in the house. Deborah, good morning to you. Judith, good morning to you. KW is here. The Don is here. He's got questions. Don. Yeah. Ginger, good morning to you. Let's see here. Angel Knight's in the house. Praise be to God. Let's see here. Lynn Pine is here. Junior Barra. Jane, good morning to you. Patty, good morning to you. Thank you guys for being here. If you guys have questions, let us know in the comments. Make sure to tag producer Jake or myself so I can try to see them. Again, active faith, Jesus' life, and Mary is dead. Oh, okay. So let's see. What did Jesus say in John chapter 8? God is the God of the living, not the dead. I mean, you can be a Pharisaical all you wish, but I'm pretty sure your team loses in the end. So you may want to rethink that process. God is the God of the living, not the dead. And just like he can take Enoch and Elijah, he could take Our Lady too, body, blood, soul, or body and soul into heaven, if that is God's holy will. And I think he's proven that over the years. Let's see here. There's always every once in a while there's always a Protestant in the group that wants to like throw wrenches. Gloria Patri, welcome and good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out. My book just arrived. Can't wait to start it. All right, cool. Let us know if you guys have read it. Let us know if you have a copy of it. Let us know. Now, let me ask you this, because there was so much that I wanted to focus on during the radio side that we have more time now to talk about. But like, I was very fascinated by the fact that, like, you're composers, you're musicians, you're singers. Like, your world is in the music business for television and film. But like, you did this is like a scholarly work. I mean, was that process difficult for you? I mean, it must have fascinated you so much. It must have occupied space in your mind so much that you could not resist but put the effort in.
Oh gosh, we were obsessed.
We call it our wonderful obsession.
We called it our wonderful obsession. Monique and I met in 2009. She saw the poem. She was puzzled and actually disturbed by it, and especially by what the secular scholars said. And we vowed then, and we weren't even married yet, but we said, we got married in 2012, but we said, we're going to, any downtime that we have, we got to go to the original source, historical sources.
And dig things out.
And dig things out and get to the bottom of this. And I mean, we went to Mesoamerican conferences. We actually met a lot of the scholars that are really kind of the stars in this area. And we
spent a lot of time figuring out original sources, which took forever, just because they're difficult to find.
Oh,
yeah,
I need to ask you.
Difficult to find.
Let's follow up on that one right after. If you finish saying what you're saying, original sources. I don't want to forget original sources. I want to talk about that. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, but essentially, I had to call my agent, my composer agent, up and say, don't call me until we finish this book, and
nuked it.
Essentially, nuked my composer career.
Oh no!
Yeah,
it had to be done.
Calls stopped, and I lost many of my clients that I used to work with. But, it was described, it was one of those treasures, that is said in the Bible that you find that you sell everything for because you think you're onto something. And we thought that we were onto something. And of course, the Don, who's in the chat, he helped us so much and he encouraged us and said, no, you really are onto something. You really have to dedicate
and you have to finish this.
You have to finish it. He helped us
even
us financially, and he kicked our behinds
Glory
to
be
the
to
finish
God.
line.
He did.
That's so awesome.
And we got it done. And in terms of the scholarly aspect, we just wanted to do it right. We knew that this hypothesis was so out there.
Could be very controversial for different parties. So we knew we had to cover our bases, cross our T's, dot our I's, and make sure we left no stone unturned because we knew what we could potentially be hit with. So we had to go as far as we did.
Yeah. Amen. Hey, KP Jack 06, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Says, Our Lady of Guadalupe is the screensaver on my phone and sun visor on my car. I love her. Yay and amen. Joanne Reyes, good morning to you. Says, can't wait to get the book. Yeah, amen. I think you're going to enjoy it. There's a lot of, I love history, so this is right up my alley, but there's a lot of great information about really trying to wrap your head around the world, because Joseph and Monique, one of the things I rant about, the audience will tell you, if you read the comments, I'm sure somebody will say this, but like I beat this thing like a dead horse. I will often refer to original sources when and where possible. And on this story, on the conquest of the Aztec Empire in particular, I like to reference Bernal Diaz's work because he was on all three expeditions of the Spaniards, and he, like a soldier, he just kind of gives you like the bare details. He doesn't really elaborate a lot. He doesn't embellish. He actually criticizes other contemporary works for their embellishments. He doesn't believe Hernan Cortez was a saint, and yet he does show us that Hernan Cortez, for all of his faults and foibles, you can say the guy clearly had a heart to save these people from their worship of the devil himself, which is, I think, fascinating because I think you guys get into this in the book, and that is, so there's this prefigurement, there's this laying the foundation, paving the way towards the day that heaven could come and rescue these people. And then there's the hijacking of this world through the devil and the worship of Satan and demons, and how they did their idols and their human sacrifices, which Bernal Diaz describes to great detail in his work. Are you familiar? You must be familiar with Bernal Diaz's work. What is your opinion of his work?
I'm very appreciative of the amount of work that he put into it. It can get gory, but it was a gory time. It was a gory culture. So just kind of take it for what it is. I mean, he was actually there. There are very few people who were in the midst of that, who put their words to paper. So that we have it at all is an absolute treasure. So
right. And then there's a little bit of backstory that we could provide to that. He was a Dominican, and the thing is that there was a little bit of rivalry, quite a bit of rivalry between the Dominicans and the Franciscans at the time.
Yes,
the Franciscans arrived first,
big one.
and actually, on two sides of the corner was Diaz, but on the other side, on the Franciscan side, is a friar named Friar
Toribio de Benevente Motolonia.
He goes by Motolonia, which means the ragged one in Nahuatl. There's a lot of backstory to that. But equally, and actually a really wonderful book that Toribio de Motolonia wrote is called The History of the Indians of New Spain. And actually, that is the source book for where we know about the 5 to 10 million conversions. That's the original source history. Unfortunately, that book is really hard to find.
There's only 500 copies that were made on the first printing.
In English.
Of the English
translation. But
so tracking it down is very difficult.
It's equally beautiful to the Diaz book, because it talks about how they were trying to convert the indigenous, and when they were converted, how much they embraced Christianity, by burning their pagan idols right in front of them, but also the love that the Franciscans had for these people and what they did to try to bring the Christian faith to them, not forcefully. They did it by love. They did it by persuasion, which goes against the narrative that they were all forced. There was only 40 priests on the ground in that decade. So how can 40 priests force convert millions of people?
Yeah.
So
I love when you talk about that and how sad it was when we put a pause on their baptisms and people were desperate to be baptized and had to wait. Yeah. I mean, think about the confusion today. If someone comes to the church and says, I want to be baptized, I'm like, well, let's just see how this goes first. I mean, why don't you guys just pause that, hold up? I mean, how many people would just walk away from that and never come into the church? And these people, I mean, just the fact that they were like, no, we have to be baptized. Like, that is such an amazing thing to even comprehend. By the way, we got some Maria. Good morning to you. I'm glad you're here. Says, I read the Our Lady of Guadalupe book years ago. I'll buy this new book and read it. I have a beautiful statue of Our Lady at home. God bless you both. Well, thank you for that. Praise be to God. There was another comment here. Let me just see if I can find it. Frank says, my great grandfather on my dad's side was Alvaro Velasco, composer in Pancho Villa Band. He composed Guadalupe hymn in Mexico. That's cool. That's awesome. Praise be to God.
That's a great tidbit.
I wanted to ask you guys about original sources. So one was on Bernal Diaz and those original sources, which I got to try to track down that book you just mentioned. I'm going to remind myself to look for that. But I wanted to talk about the original story of Our Lady of Guadalupe appearing to Juan Diego. You guys tell... I didn't know. I bet most people don't know. Like, where's the oldest copy? What's the original source for the actual events that happened on Tepeyac? And how did it almost escape humanity?
Okay. Guadalupe appeared in 1531. In the 1600s, there were 4 different versions of the Guadalupe story. The first one was published in Spanish in 1648. The one that is the popular one that everybody refers to, and the one that we take apart in our book, is one by Father Luis Lasso de la Vega in 1649.
It's the only one in Nahuatl.
Yeah, that's the only one in Nahuatl. Then there's another one in 1666 and another one in 1688. Now, what's interesting about the 1649 Nahuatl version is there's a fragment that was actually written. Some scholars think it was either written between 1548 and 1556.
So now, very close to the actual event.
Correct.
Exactly. That version is actually in the New York Public Library, and that's a long story how it ended up there. But anyway, that's kind of the original source. But the Nahuatl version that was published, but in 1649, and by the way, there was only about 250 published, and that was a small pamphlet. It's really great because it was in the time when we make the case and other people make the case that the story would have been oral history, that it would have been actually sung. It would have been turned into a flower song, as we talk about, and that's the way it would have spread, because that's the way they did things per tradition. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And corroborating it is this earlier fragment that matches the 1649 version word for word,
Pretty much word for word.
up to where it stops.
Right.
So it's just further confirmation that oral cultural history being memorized and spread around.
Right, but by the time we get to the 1920s, in fact, there was only 2 remaining copies of the 1649 version, and somehow, well, of course, this was anti-Catholic. It was around the time, actually, that the bombing occurred of the Guadalupe Tilma.
Same time, yes.
Within a couple of years of that, those 2 remaining copies were lost. So a person...
They had to piece it together.
Yeah, they had to find all these different fragments of it, put it together, and then a gentleman named Primo Feliciano translated into Spanish. So it's fortuitous that we actually even have
it,
this narrative today.
But that's true of the Cantares Mexicanos as well.
Yeah, so many other documents. They could have been lost to history at any time.
Yeah, the original one says Judith is the Nika Moapoa, and that's the one that they really get into in the book, Judith, by the way. That's the one there that is referenced quite a bit. But I wanted to hear how it ended up in the New York. I want to hear that story. I find that utterly fascinating. How did that fragment, the oldest possible source, how did it end up in New York, in the New York Public Library? That's a fascinating story to me.
Okay, so the way they believe it happened is there was, I'm going to give some hard Nahuatl names, by the name of Fernando de Alba Ixtlilxochitl. He was... No. Oh, okay. So
Fernando Ramirez.
Okay, so what happened was Antonio Valeriano, who was one of the governors of Mexico City at the time in the 1500s, he's credited with writing that first fragment that's at the New York Public Library, and he passed it down in his family. But the problem was it ended, a whole bunch of the earlier documents were kind of thrown into the basements of some of the initial colleges. And in the middle of the 1800s, and convents, in the middle of the 1800s is the Reforma period, is one of the first big blasts of sort of anti-Catholic sentiment. They tried seizing a lot of the properties from the Catholic Church. And there was an interesting gentleman by the name of Fernando Ramirez who made it sort of his quest to try and gather all of these documents so they would not get destroyed under his own tutelage. And upon doing that, he started copying a lot of them, handwriting them with the help of a gentleman by the name of Chimalpopoca. And when everything started getting very incendiary, literally incendiary, he fled with the documents to Germany.
Yeah, this would have been during the time of Cinco de Mayo. Everybody knows that. During the French occupation, Maximilian Carlota, who were executed. So a lot of the loyalists who were royalists actually had to flee for their lives. So this gentleman, Fernando Ramirez, had to flee to Bonn, Germany, and he took these documents with him. Well, anyway, his descendants, after he died, decided that they were going to sell all these historical documents.
For whatever the reason.
Yeah, well, they wanted to make money.
They wanted to make money off of it. So they went to London, England.
Yeah, so they took them to London. They were actually auctioned off in London. And you could see the catalog number of the collection. In fact, it was called Monumentos Guadalupanos, right? Anyway, a gentleman named, what is his name? The collection? Lennox from New York City bought the whole collection, bought a whole lot. And he's actually pretty famous because he was one of the people who actually
created the New York Public Library.
New York Public Library. He was one of the major benefactors. So to this day, there's actually the Lennox collection of all the historical documents that he bought from all around the world.
And so that's why it's now at
the
New York.
Monumentos Guadalupanos is a part of his collection. It's really hard to get in there to see the original document.
You have to make the reservations far in advance, the gloves, everything.
You have to have a PhD. They have to vet you. We try to get in. Even a collaborator who actually has a PhD in early Spanish colonial literature.
He couldn't get in.
He couldn't get in. So it's really hard to see.
Who do they let in?
Yeah.
Underwater basket weaving?
No
problem. Come on in.
I don't know.
But you
do they only let scholars in who are doubters? Maybe is there like a political bias there, or whereas if you're a doubter, then you're welcome, but if you believe, then you're not, kind of a thing?
We could speculate that maybe because, he wrote out a whole thing because we thought if anybody could get in there, it would be our collaborator.
Dr.
Dr.
Ezekiel Steer.
And they said, nope, sorry, you can't come in.
That is crazy. Judith asked the question, what does Nika Moapoa mean? What's the literal translation of that?
Here it is told. It's the first few words of the document.
Yeah,
So
Nikon, it's a common word where it is told.
So which is fascinating. So in other words, the title is taken from the first line, similar to how encyclicals are taken from the first line. So I find that fascinating.
That is correct.
Before I forget, because I will forget, let's go to the Don's question. The Don was eager for me to ask you about how do you guys feel about the Pachamama or the Aztec, the Amazonian Synod, or say like the Aztec? It's not called the Aztec; it's called the Amazonian Mass. I don't know what the proper term that the Vatican may be referring to. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure people refer to it as the Amazonian Rite. Like, what is your take on all of that? And given all of your study, your history, your culture, like, how do you look at all of those events now that are happening in the church?
I'm going to let Joseph lead on this.
Yeah, okay. I think there's two broad titles. I'll try to be yeah, it's really a big deal because we're going into the area of syncretism. Mm-hmm. The definition of that is where you blend two different religions to come up with a third religion where it has aspects of both.
And there's been considered problematic in regards to Our Lady of Guadalupe, which we'll go into.
Yeah, it's a big topic. In fact, most scholars actually give a name for they call it Mexican Catholicism, where that would actually be defined as syncretism, where it's a blending of Catholic Catholicism and pagan ideas.
And we're not saying that Guadalupe is that, but that's what many secular scholars say.
Right.
It gets hijacked.
So
she gets hijacked.
She gets hijacked, and she has been hijacked, unfortunately, by not only the secular scholars, but also by a lot of the Protestants who are saying that Guadalupe is an Aztec pagan goddess. We go into detail in the book, and we say it is not syncretism at all, and we give several reasons. Number one, in the account itself, she never refers to herself as an Aztec pagan goddess. She's always clearly saying, I am the mother of the one supreme God. There's no syncretism in the account itself. Number two, in our book, we're saying that pagan ideas were a bridge to lead people to the true Catholic faith. So getting to the Pachamama idea, unfortunately, what's happening is that it's blurring in people's minds. It's actually promoting this idea
that you can
blend things, that you can add, you can somehow
retain pagan elements with Catholic elements, which is an impossibility. It has to be either one or the other, right?
Right. Yes. And clearly what happened by the reaction of the indigenous when they were converting, they were forsaking their pagan idols. They were forsaking
their properties, their slaves, their extra wives. They were doing everything possible to make themselves capable of living a Christian life and obtaining Christian baptism because they knew they had to give it up.
And they actually seemed overly scrupulous because they were the priest would give them a penance and they say, no, give me more. I need to, I'm really need to be worthy of this.
By any American Catholic ever?
No.
Exactly. So
that's nice and all, Father, but could I get some hair shirt action or something? I mean, like nobody ever asks for more, but they are.
It's just like that.
It's extreme. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the thing is that number one, you don't want to blend religions to create syncretism.
You don't want to stay
and number two, you don't want to go
backwards.
You don't want to go back to paganism.
It's brutal.
No,
but
it's brutal.
It's tragic in the way that it circumvents the whole rescue operation. Like to put the plan in place 3 millennia prior to 1531, to begin to work towards their salvation that far in advance, only to say, well, let's just embrace this culture for what it is and sort of make it all fit. Like that's to hijack the operation itself, which is like not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. I was very critical of the Pachamama incident. I continue to be very critical of it. And when anybody says, well, that's just Our Lady of Amazon, I don't think Our Lady would allow herself, let alone her divine child, would allow his mother to be presented in an immodest way. So I don't think it passes the smell test just at that level, let alone bigger, more compelling arguments that could be made. But here's, I think, here's the thing I would like to get you to comment on, because it breaks my heart. So I was raised in Texas, grew up in San Antonio, so not far from the border. I'm used to the culture of the immigrant peoples coming from Mexico. The immigrants mostly coming today aren't from Mexico; they're from other countries and places, parts of the world. But what I guess what makes me sad about it all is similar to like my wife's Portuguese family. They're immigrants. They came to this country from the Azores. They came with their rosary beads, but that's just about it. They're culturally Catholic, but it's a sliver. It's a sliver of the reality of their Catholic faith. I see the same thing, but I almost say it's dare I say it's almost worse coming from Mexico right now. When I watch, like, there's a particular person, I won't say his name, but he is a former federale. He left before he was either executed or bribed, and now he's a consultant, and he's on news agencies and podcasts, and he born and raised in Tijuana, and when he talks about his Catholic faith, he talks about it from this syncretistic type of aspect. He doubts the reality of Our Lady of Guadalupe. He meshes Santa Muerte and the Catholic faith and melds them together. And I don't think he does so intentionally or with an evil intent. He does so because that's everybody in his whole world believes that. And so he's born and raised in this culture, and he thinks that this is normal and this is just the way it is, and those Catholics are crazy and this is the reality of it. Like, my heart breaks, because I would say if we could go back to Our Lady of Guadalupe and what she has done, the people coming over that border would convert the whole dang world. I mean, they would bring to us this evangelization that we desperately need and convert our culture. Instead, what happens, they don't convert our culture. Instead, they come across that border and they become just like the rest of us. We convert them and not the other way around, as I believe it's supposed to be intended. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm going to set this up for Joseph, but I'm going to start by saying we hope that our book will help to provide a paradigm shift on who Mexican Americans or Mexicans believe they are, because I think, and Joseph, I've discussed this quite a bit, that what might be happening is, you have a lot of like the narcos who are believing that their identity is that of the Mexica God. So they're trying to retain their culture and think that by doing that, they're embracing, who and what they are. And we're kind of trying to hopefully stepping in and saying who the people of Mesoamerica are is something different, if you want to jump off from that.
Right. So, it's very, very sad. The root of this misunderstanding is Guadalupe. The belief that Guadalupe is Tonantzin or some sort of pagan goddess. So we actually have to go to the root of the story, and that's where we go in our book. So if you could change that premise, then hopefully you could be able to change all the other errors that has happened over the centuries. It is very common, brujeria, witchcraft, curanderas, these supposed healers are very much part of the Mexican culture. And it, before this was an accepted thing. I'm Mexican American, and that was a common thing. Even my mom used to tell me stories about going to curanderas and things like that. Of course, she doesn't do that now, but it's very sad because, of course, it's like a Ouija board. Once you kind of open up that door, you can let in all sorts of evil. And I would just like to say to my brothers and sisters, Hispanics, don't open those doors. Don't go there. And you have to understand that Guadalupe is not an Aztec goddess. And the reason why that's so important, because if you believe that, then you're just one step away to believing in Santa Muerte or Holy Death, the skeleton of Guadalupe. It's a mockery. And that's where you eventually lead to. You lead to a demon worship. That's really what Santa Muerte is. So it has to be nipped in the bud. That's why these syncretistic ideas of Pachamama are so dangerous, because it opens the door. It really has to be, you have to be on one team or the other, and you have to embrace the true Catholic faith. And we could go into it. I mean, there's been a fight in the academic world really from about the 1920s and 1940s in Mexico, where they've been trying to twist this. And unfortunately, our Protestants friends are just making it worse, because they are promulgating this idea, these syncretistic ideas. So I don't know. Somehow it needs to stop. But once we could comment.
Yeah, just to say to circle back to like the premise of our book, which is that there was a foundational story that was undergirding all this, and it was this idea of wanting to be worthy of a flower world paradise, so that you can live with your Creator forever, and that was the ancestral desire, the ancestral quest. So Juan Diego coming along and fulfilling that quest, it kind of caps off this multi-generational story that, it's just basically just to remind people, like, that's the focus, not Huitzilopochtli, not Quetzalcoatl, not Santa Muerte. It's the desire to live in flower world. So maybe we just need to reawaken that hunger for this paradisal realm.
Right.
That was one of the most mind-blowing parts of the whole thing to me, was just like, oh, because like before it would be like, okay, well, the Nahua people, they see the tilma and they go, oh yeah, okay, this is like reading a book. I exactly know what that means, and this means, and the stars. Yes, I get that, and and I could see all of that before, but this opened my mind to like. Now it makes sense why they ran as fast as possible in droves to be baptized. And as you described so vehemently, no, you must baptize us. Like that, it just blows my mind, because in their world, they were cut off. And, a sort of similar parallel is, and I quote Rodney Stark a lot when I talk about naysayers to the faith, or like feminists in modernist feminism, because they say that the church suppresses women. And I say, well, it's the church that converted women in the Roman Empire. Rodney Stark, not a Catholic, an agnostic, even he points this out in his works, how women in pagan cultures had very difficult and harsh lives. And Christianity provided something completely different and beautiful, which attracted them. And then they brought their husbands along with them, and it helped to convert the empire. So I see those parallels here, and it just blows my mind away to think about it. By the way, T-Storm asks us, what was the author of the other account that you mentioned? The one that was hard to find? I think it was was it a Franciscan work that you said it's 500 copies and hard to get? What was the name on that one?
Toribio de Benavente Motolinia.
The translation is by Elizabeth Foster. It was published in 1958. It's hard to find that. It should be.
You can find it at universities. So actually, University of Austin does have one copy. Just FYI.
Really?
Well, we were able to get one through Cal State, Los Angeles.
Yeah, because that's closer
we
to
know
us.
there's a copy there. But that's a beautiful, the history of the Indians of New Spain, La Historia de los Indios de la Nueva España in Spanish.
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's a PDF of the Spanish version online you might be able to find.
But I think it's an archive.org, the Spanish version.
How many, I know there's a general awareness. Obviously, there's a general awareness of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico amongst Mexican peoples. Obviously, they know of her and they have icons and imagery of her. But do they really know? Like, how much do they really know about the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe? I mean, it's general, it's broad strokes. Not everybody fits into that category. But just in general, what would you say is the level of knowledge and awareness of the actual events in the history of Our Lady of Guadalupe versus maybe cultural identity?
You know, we've lived in Mexico at different periods of time, and what we've encountered is that most people don't. Joseph can speak more to that.
It's kind of, it's kind of relegated to the idea of myth and simplicity. That actually, a lot of people unfortunately think of Guadalupe and the narrative and everything is like a fairy tale for children. Low information, this and that. Of course, in our book, what we say is that, the Nahua people, the Mexica, the Aztecs, everybody else, they were highly sophisticated people.
It doesn't make sense.
They were highly artistic. They had mandatory education. They were deeply philosophical. They believed in a transcendent reality that please learn your actual history. Don't buy this line that it was a simple childlike kind of thing that happened. But we have several different stories, kind of anecdotal, where we were giving a lecture several years ago, and this woman who was from Mexico City stood up and she said, and she was in tears. She actually said that when I took some class, Latin American class, when I was young, that the teacher said, we're going to be going into the history of Guadalupe, but I got to let you know right now, if you actually believe that Guadalupe is real, you should probably just leave the class right now, because we're starting with the premise that Guadalupe was a hoax, it was a fabrication, and that's where we're going to go with this. And
that was corroborated by other people in the audience at the same time, so it really hit us hard to realize that.
And she was in tears. She said, I wish I would have had this information. I didn't have ammunition to fire back with him. So she was really grateful for that. But that's really kind of the state of where it is in Mexico, and it's really unfortunate.
So do you anticipate, do you see, I know the intention of your book is to help change all of that, and I pray it does. But do you see like a big transformation of Mexico coming? I mean, like we've been talking about, they seem to be so far from those days that I feel like if there could be a reconquista of Mexico for Our Lady and for the Lord, that I really feel like it would change America. It would change North America. It would change, I would say, reverberate around the world. But is such a change actually coming?
I mean, we're speaking from speculation and personal belief, but
course.
Just the nature of us finding all of this right now in the last few years, and even over the course of the 14 years, new things were coming up, new studies were coming up, corroborating further and further the direction we were going. It just leads us personally to think that absolutely Guadalupe and God is doing something to educate her children and to shed more light and reason, not just a sense of piety, something more grounded, not only for the people of Mexico, but everybody here in the Americas. So it's our personal belief that it's inevitable on some level, but we're just waiting to see it play out.
And let me give you a little bit more information. The first full translation of these flower songs didn't happen until 1985.
That's
the expert in this area, Miguel Leon Portilla, didn't translate into Spanish all of them until 2011. Now, as I said before, so many of these historical documents, the way they survived to our time is really a miracle. What's very interesting is that a book was just published in 2019, or was it?
2017.
Called Flower Worlds.
Oh, Flower Worlds was 2021, actually.
2021. And that's a really great book, Flower Worlds, where it outlines the whole, what we're talking about, Flower World. A priest from Mexico City, when he got his doctorate at the Pontifical University.
Tying the ancient song poems with the Nika Mapoa.
Yeah, he essentially just did, at the same time we were doing it, he was doing the same thing in his doctoral thesis.
In 2021.
He was making the case that you really can't understand the Nika Mapoa or the Guadalupe account unless you know these flower song poems. He just published that 2 years ago. So we know somewhere in Mexico we have an ally because he comes to the same conclusion. So it's very interesting that this is all kind of bubbling on the top right now. Another quick point, they just discovered a shaft under the pyramid of the plumed serpent, which is in Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City.
And it's corroborating these flower world hypothesis. That was just 2014 and 2016. Wow. So this is all new.
They found a flower-shaped shaft underneath the pyramid of the plumed serpent, which corroborates the flower world hypothesis. So these are all new things in the last few decades.
Bridget brings up an interesting question, since you guys are music people. How about the music on the tilma? So some people have taken the information from the tilma and found that it makes music. What have you guys listened to that, and what would be your opinion of it?
Yeah, this is my area. I don't know. We haven't looked into it. I haven't studied it.
It's fascinating. I have to say, I've listened to it. It's fascinating. I don't know what to make of it, but it's fascinating. The Don says, "Poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States," said ex-president Porfirio Diaz. I hope I said that correctly. I want. There was a point that I wanted to bring up, and I guess we have to wrap the whole thing up. I mean, you guys got to get the book if you haven't got it. It's just really, I couldn't recommend it enough. I can't wait to read the rest of it. Really, Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy. There was one last point though. Oh, I had it a second ago, and then I got sidetracked on the music, and I forgot it. What was it? I don't know. It'll come to me when we're all done, and I'll have to email you to ask you probably. But oh well. Thank you guys enough for your time. I really do appreciate it. Great book. Couldn't recommend it enough.
It's been fun.
Utterly fascinating to me to see. I'm a big typology guy. I'm a typology nerd. So, I saw that. This makes sense to me. Like this really, really. I mean, I grew up Protestant, so. In my world, the Church of Christ, old and new, although related, were kind of separated from each other and disconnected and disjointed in many ways in their theology. And it was it was Dr. Scott Hahn who introduced me to typology. And once I learned of typology and how the old is leading to the new and the new is perfected from the old, and my brain just exploded in thinking and seeing these connections. And it's obvious that that's the case here. And of course it's obvious because God loves every single person on planet Earth, no matter where they're from. He loves them so much that he would send his only begotten son, born of a virgin, who could have said no, by the way. And then it would have been game over because there was no plan B. But she chose to say yes to save our souls. And he loves them so much that he would send his own mother to welcome them into the flower world, to Eden, back to paradise, where we're all welcome to go, but we have to choose to go. And would we be like the Nawa people and run, not walk, to receive those sacraments and to give up our pagan ways to receive this gift, this treasure found in a field? So what a great story. What a great work. God bless you, Joseph and Monique. Thank you so much.
Amen,
have
Joe.
a great day.
That was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Have to have you back. We'll see you guys on Monday.